The Balance of Harmony, Interlude 7. Twilight pulled herself out of her spell, looking around as she came back to reality. She had been working non-stop for the last few days, determined to finish her story, but the last few hours had been some of the most painful she had experienced during the course of this project. She touched her face, feeling the expected tears, and smiled sadly. Watching the deaths of Fluttershy and Applejack once more had torn at her heart. Seeing Applejack fall away like that sad smile. She shook her head, doing her best to master herself once more. Looking out of the window, she noticed that it was late afternoon. Feeling a sudden urge to move, she pushed herself up, catching herself as she noticed a small piece of paper hanging on the window in front of her. She took it down, seeing Spike's handwriting on a memo for her. Twilight, remember to grab your stuff before walking. I had to go out and take care of a few things. Be back soon. Spike. She smiled at his thoughtfulness and reached out to grab her stuff. Limping away from her desk, she found herself heading for the door to the cottage, grabbing her cloak. She stepped outside, enjoying the afternoon sun on her face, and paused, unsure of what she should do, but feeling a need to do something. A moment later, she was closing the door behind her and limping out into the road, a specific destination in mind. As she walked the streets of Aquas, heading towards her destination, she felt eyes on her. She glanced around, noticing that people were staring at her, and briefly felt that same sense of self-consciousness she had earlier in the week when the children had run away from her. However, the feeling was short-lived as people began smiling and waving to her as she looked at them, and she smiled back, feeling a sense of belonging. Twilight walked through the bustling marketplace and heard her name called from a nearby stall. She turned to see a young man with golden hair leaning on his stall, different shapes and colors of candles decorating his table. "Hi there, Miss Twilight. Haven't you seen about you for a while? How are you?" Twilight smiled back. "Hi, Candlewick," she replied. "I'm doing." She frowned. He frowned. "That's all? Sorry to hear that. You okay?" She nodded half-heartedly. "Yeah, I guess I am. It's just been a rough couple of days." He nodded, understanding. "Having a hard time with this story?" he asked. Twilight looked over at him, surprised. "How did you know about that?" she asked, confused. Spike's been talking it up to pretty much anybody he can whenever he comes by," Candlewick replied, smiling happily. "Everyone's excited about it. We all want to hear about the heroes who saved the world. It's one thing to read about it in the history books, but to read it from your point of view?" He sighed happily. "That would be amazing. It would be like being there." Twilight's face froze slightly. He noticed the change in her demeanor and immediately became contrite. "Oh, gosh, I'm sorry, Miss Twilight. I wasn't thinking," and his voice petered out and he hung his head. "Sorry," he finished lamely. She reached out and patted him on the hand, a sad smile on her face. "I know, Candlewick. I know you didn't mean anything by it." She paused a moment, thinking back. "And you know what? I was there and it was amazing. It was amazing what my friends were willing to do for me, and for everyone here." He looked up at her hopefully, and she continued, smiling. "I still miss them terribly, but they were truly an amazing group of women." His excitement returned, and he said, "So you're gonna show us all when you're done?" he asked. She nodded. "Of course, Candlewick," she replied. "Of course." "Yes!" he cried, pumping his fist in the air. "Thanks, Miss Twilight. It's gonna be awesome." She smiled at his enthusiasm, reminded of their Rainbow Dash for a moment. Thanking him, she continued on through the marketplace, waving to other familiar faces as they greeted her, feeling buoyed Is that even an English word? I don't know if I pronounce it right, but I give it a shot. Feeling buoyed by Candlewick's excitement at seeing her work, she left the marketplace, heading for the north end of town, walking serenely through the streets until she finally reached her destination, the cemetery. Passing through the gateway, she moved with a single purpose, weaving her way through the gravestones until she reached a specific patch where two graves sat next to a large monument. As she approached, she was surprised to see the familiar form of Spike kneeling next to the center gravestone, placing a fresh bouquet of flowers. He looked up in surprise as she limped up and smiled at her. "Hey, Twilight, you came up for air," he joked. "Ha ha," she replied, smiling back. "I needed a break. I just got partway through Dragon Mountain and—" She trailed off, the pang coming back into her chest as she tried to push away the memories. Spike looked away, and she saw the guilt on his face. She never blamed him for not coming with them after Rarity's death, and had told him so many times, but she knew that he still felt guilty about not being there during their struggles. They stayed there in silence for a time, Twilight leaning on her staff, and Spike sitting next to Rarity's grave. She heard a sniffle from him, and looked down in concern. "Spike?" she asked. He wiped his nose quickly and continued to stare at Rarity's gravestone. "It's just, I never really got to tell her how I felt." "Oh, Spike," she replied. "Everybody knew how you felt, even her." She smiled. "It was pretty obvious." He shook his head. "It's not the same, you know. Just once I wanted to tell her how much I loved her, but I never got up the courage to actually say it." Twilight moved over to him, placing her hand on his shoulder. "I know, Spike. When I lost Applejack, I realized that there was so much that I wanted to say to everyone, but never had a chance." She looked up at the memorial, which had the carved likenesses of all of her friends. "But you know what? That's why we can come here and talk to them. It's not the same, and it never will be. But at least it's something." She suddenly felt his arms around her, hugging her tightly. They smiled at each other through their sudden tears. "You know I love you, right, Twilight?" he asked. She hugged him back. "I do, Spike, I do. And I love you too." With that, they stood there, holding each other tightly in silence, as the sun crept down towards the horizon and stained the sky with fiery colors. Nothing needed to be said, and they both knew it, for everything that could be spoken in that moment was felt through their embrace. When the sun dipped below the horizon and the night sky turned a deep blue black, they turned from the memorial and started back to the cottage, Twilight's arm around Spike as she limped along, her staff lightening the way.